Hey guys, my name is Chris Mock. I am a graduate student studying course 6, and I'm here to present my project proposal called Sous.AI, and it is a speech and gesture enabled kitchen assistant. So, just to give a little background about myself, some motivation for the project. Growing up, I had a lot of cooking in the kitchen as well as tailgating at football games. That was a big part of my upbringing, and I was always around either my mom or dad or friends making and cooking food. So, I started cooking seriously as a hobby once I got to college and kind of had to cook on my own. Some reasons why I love to cook are I find it very therapeutic, both the process as well as eating the food. It allows me to be very creative with what I do. It's always a new learning experiences. It's always a new learning experience. Brings its own challenges, as well as you get to eat delicious food. And as you can see here, here are some dishes I made myself recently. On the left, we have some shrimp pad thai, and on the right, a nice New York strip with some gold Yukon potatoes. So, what's the problem? Um, well, I find myself, it's pretty boring to cook the same recipes over and over again. So I always like to branch off and explore and to find new things. Um, so when you're researching for a new recipe, one of the big things is, well, you have to figure out what ingredients you need, what are the instructions, what's the serving sizes, and all these elements add up to create somewhat of a frustrating experience if you're making a recipe for the first time. Since you don't know what to do, you have to constantly check back with the recipe, you have to check instructions, and this can be somewhat frustrating. So what do I do in new recipes? Well, it brings new challenges, um, and what happens is as you're making um, food, as I'm making new recipes, my hands get very messy. I'm usually handling cooking utensils, handling raw meats, vegetables, all of which does not lead to interaction with both physical paper, like cookbooks, as well as mobile devices. So I find myself washing my hands very often in order to access the recipe. Your phone goes to sleep sometimes, and it ends up being a very somewhat frustrating process, and I think detracts from the cooking experience as a whole. So I propose a solution, in this case, my system called Sous.AI, as a simple web interface that allows for speech and gesture manipulation of essentially a recipe system. So there's essentially two user flows. We have the recipe creation flow and the cooking phase, which essentially you start by inputting the recipe that you want to cook, however you want, and then once you have that, you're able to perform certain actions and functionality once you're in the cooking phase. And all of this combines to be a hands-free, on-demand cooking assistant as you're cooking in the kitchen or wherever you would like to cook. So some functionality. In the recipe creation phase, the user will input the desired recipe either through manually typing or through a speech to text interface. At this stage, you can modify, add, remove different elements of the recipe, whether it be the ingredients or the instructions, with your voice as well as gesture. And what does this do? Well, this benefits because we can group like items together, such as sometimes recipes often will have all the ingredients enlisted in one big long list, and you tend to use different ingredients in different parts of the recipe. So in order to make this more efficient for the user, um, we can use this stage as a way to group different ingredients that are used together in the instructions. As well as one thing I always find with recipes that's tricky is sometimes the serving size is much larger or much smaller than what you're cooking for. And some websites do not allow you to modify this serving size and scale it across the entire recipe, which leads to, again, more frustration having to do all the math to convert all the numbers. Um, then in the cooking stage, we can query the recipe with questions. We can ask for unit serving conversions, check off suited ingredients once they're completed. We can ask for the instructions to be vocalized so that we don't have to be visually looking at the recipe when we're cooking. Maybe we're stirring something on the stove where we don't have access to the recipe. We can ask for, oh, what was instruction number 3? Um, and again, this allows for more hands-free access, more additional functionality that just a standard recipe on a screen wouldn't provide, and most importantly, it provides more fun and less frustration. So here's a welcome page that I envision. We just have some simple text, new recipe, or load existing. If we click new recipe, we can say something like, create recipe pad thai. This will generate a new recipe and title it whatever you say. Say we want to add a sauce. So you say add 2 tablespoons of soy sauce to sauces. That creates the group sauces and adds the corresponding ingredient. Then we can say something like make cook noodles instruction 1. That will add, the instruction cook noodles to instructions 1. And this process can continue for as many groups as you want, both in the ingredients and for the instructions. And you can add and remove, modify, scale, all of these to your liking. Then in the cooking stage, we can ask something like, well, how much soy sauce do we need to use? And it would respond with 2 tablespoons. Or maybe you say, convert soy sauce to teaspoons, and it would respond with 2 tablespoons, which is in the recipe, is equivalent to 6 teaspoons. Maybe we want to, we're done with the sauces in this recipe, and we say, okay, let's check off sauces. That will put a line through all the sauces and denote that those have already been used. As for a gesture, we could do something like grab sauces, which we would hover our hand over the sauces group. We would be able to select that and then move that to a different location. Maybe we want to create room for additional instructions or additional ingredients. As for system design, our inputs would be hand gestures and our voice. This would both lead into the Leap sensor as well as its API and the Google Speech or Web Search or Web Speech API. This would all be funneled into a Python handler, which would then output the corresponding graphics to our either a Python GUI or our web application. So for our libraries, we have Leap API, which has the hand gestures, or which will handle the hand gestures. We have the Google Web Speech HPI, which will handle the speech to text conversions. And finally, I plan on using Backbone.js, which will allow for a simple web interface. Components already provided is Leap Camera, which you already have from the project sets. And custom built will be my Python scripts, the web interfaces, and the speech handling pipeline. The current status, so I'm currently getting comfortable with Backbone.js as I don't have a lot of previous experience with web dev, so that's one thing that's going to be challenging. As well as I'm currently testing different speech-to-text APIs, figuring out which ones are usable, which ones are most efficient, and finally connectivity to Leap, making sure that's fluid, as well as just making sure that the whole process is going to go smooth. So how am I going to evaluate this? Well, first thing will be usability. So one question I'll ask is, does this enhance cooking and not detract from it further? I think if this is a system that's going to be used for cooking, you want it to obviously add and not detract from the cooking experience. Ease of interaction, how easy a system to interact with while you're cooking. Does it provide a hands-free experience? This is meant to be used in the kitchen where your hands are going to be messy. So does this system allow for interaction without physical touch? And finally, I can add some subjective evaluations, such as, does it make cooking more fun as a whole? So that's my presentation for my Sous.AI project. Thanks for watching, and I would love any feedback. Thanks.